Welcome to Commander Central episode 264, and today we'll be taking a look at patron supporter Steve Leahy's Torbran Shadowborn Apostles list. I'm Dana.
So I'm Chris, and Dana, I would like to correct you because I do believe it's Taborax Shadowborn Apostles list.
What did I? Oh, I said Torbran. Well, let me redo that. Welcome to Commander Central, episode 264, and today we'll be taking a look at patron supporter Steve Leahy's Taborax Shadowborn Apostles list. I'm Dana.
And I'm Chris.
Chris, how's it going today, man?
Oh, it's going wonderful. Yesterday, I don't know, I had some sort of weird bug that hit me. I talked to a friend of mine, and she thinks that I was low on electrolytes because I've been dieting. So today
sure.
I feel much, much better, so that's a positive.
Well, good. Good to hear. And I got to see you on Tuesday at the shop. That was a good time.
Sure did.
You were busy working, but I played quite a few games.
Yeah, I didn't get to play any games. It sucked. I really wanted to, but hopefully this weekend, maybe I can. We'll see.
We had a player came in, so during the day Tuesday, a guy messaged me that I haven't talked to in a couple of years, like, hey, you going to be at the shop tonight? And I was like, sure, come on and play. And it was I'm going to say kid, but he's in his early 20s now. But when we first started playing, he was like 16. He's like a 16-year-old when we were first playing at the shop. And of course, now he's like 24. And so we've been playing Commander a long time. But he was moving and wanted to like get one final game in at the shop, one final night, and wanted to know if I was going to be there. So we played a couple games. That was just a weird thing to kind of like realize that when we were first playing Commander, the 16-year-old kid was playing with us. We all pitched in and bought him a playmat for his high school graduation.
Sure
I remember
did.
that. And even that was like 6 years ago. He's now like a fully functional adult with a job that's making him move to a different city. So
Yep.
Time does indeed fly when you're playing Commander, for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that. I was sitting there. I was eating supper at the time when he came walking in, and he's like, can I sit down with you guys? I sat down, and I'm like, no way. Is that who I think it is?
You just like refused him?
Yeah, I was just like, no way.
So yeah, that was cool to see him. I got to play some fun games. It was a pretty good night, and it's nice to just be going back and having that part of my Tuesday routine again.
Agreed. It's nice to see everyone come in. I know on Monday we run a modern event thing for all our local modern players, and we had been averaging maybe about 8 people. On Monday we had 14 people show up. I was like,
nice.
Oh, where'd you guys all come from? And they were all like the originals, like part of my traveling team that we had and all that. They all started coming back out, and it was really nice. Like I could feel it like tugging at my heartstrings, It's just like,
sure.
I haven't seen all you guys in over a year, and
yeah.
It was great.
Well, and also our shop is, I was talking to the shop owners, and you work there, Chris, so
Yep.
you definitely already knew this, but it's not a huge space, so it's always been kind of tight, particularly for events. Yeah, and like when there's a pre-release and there's like 40 people there, it's super tight. So they have been like talking for a while about finding a new place, and they did finally settle on a new space they're going to move to in the fairly near future. It's like 6,000 square feet. It's going to be massive.
Yeah, that's kind of what we need. I mean, because then we can actually
Yeah.
allow it, because like we have a group of War Machine guys, and they take up so much room.
Right,
and
yeah.
they can only come in on Saturdays because it's usually our dead day. But now it opens it up where, if you get a bigger space, they could come in any day of the week that they have time.
And they can just have their stuff set up in one corner, and you
Yep.
can have a space for D&D games where you could even have like a whiteboard on the wall and things on the wall that you can just leave there, and they can, you can dedicate space to a whole bunch of different things then, as well as just like storage and having a real office. And
Yeah, the big thing is the storage thing. Like I think they need like at least half that area so we can sort cards, store store product. I mean, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, but it just feels good to be like hearing that they came out the other side of the pandemic too and are doing quite well. So that's good to hear as well. So that felt good. All right, should we jump into taking a look at this deck tech?
Sure, let's do it.
So Max always sends a little questionnaire that the listeners fill out, and why don't you start us off here, Chris?
Okay, so usually I think it's like 5 or 6 questions we ask. So for the first question that we ask is, what is your meta like? The response that we received was, I have 3 metas, but the one most played in and the one that will likely to remain the same after the pandemic is the Commander Central Slack. So for those of you who are not within our Slack, we have something set up where people can just get games and do it virtually over, I do believe they use Spell Table, correct, Dana?
Yep.
So that's what they do. Big thing. I'm sure that everyone can reach out and figure it out, but that's pretty much what the meta is going to be like going forward. Other than that, we were told that they have old group of friends that from out of town that they play with, that is fairly high power level. Like we're talking pushing CEDH levels from the looks of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then just before the pandemic, as I've heard this from a lot of people, just about to start with a new local group, you're starting to get to know people. And then, the world gets plunged into darkness and everything stopped. So we were told that, couldn't really judge that meta per se.
Sure.
But for everything that is built, they use the Slack and the spell table that they play with everyone as to what they build the decks around.
And we ask, what is the goal of the deck? And Steve says, while getting fatty demons out and turning them sideways can sometimes win games, the true goal of the deck is to drain our opponents while getting major card advantage through sacrifices to find those answers and win conditions.
I see where we're going with this one.
Yeah.
So now one of the great big questions, that needs to be asked for everyone,
Yep.
I've talked to people even in our local store when they're like, you take a look at the deck is, what are the weaknesses of your deck? Like, have you figured that out, or what area should we focus on? And we were told, feel the deck is fairly well tuned, but there's always a conversation to be had on how many demons / sack outlets / whatever card draw that you should run type of deal, because oversaturation is a thing.
Yeah.
Like what's too many or too few demons considering they are not the exact game plan? For example, there are probably better options other than Shadowborn Demon, but it's a namesake for the 25 creatures in the deck.
Sure.
I can feel you there. I got that. Yeah. So you got to keep that one in there. And then we're also told, run as few as 5 up to, more than the, what is it? Not more than the current 7. And I usually work to sack my apostles as soon as I can get to that card advantage. So usually only a Thrumming Stone gets me to the point of fetching demons. So how many sack outlets is a sweet spot? Should I have more for me? Like Phyrexian Altar, what's the tower? Phyrexian Tower, that kind of stuff, I'm assuming. Yep. Or add more force sack, kind of like Soul Shatter, or I'm sure there's quite a few other ones around there.
Yeah. One particular weakness is our early game. Taborax is a large part of getting our draw engine going, and if he gets removed a few times in a row, he's up to 7 CMC, and it can be difficult to recover. In my first more Voltron build of the deck, I had a lot more protection pieces for Taborax, but as you revised it, a lot of those were cut in favor of cards that support the strategy. A little bit of protection wouldn't hurt, but then we faced the old question of what to cut to make room for it.
That's a horrible question, too.
Yes. And the budget limit for single card or upgrades, no real limit, but he'd like to stay under $100 per single card, which in today's game isn't quite as open-ended as it once was. That used to get you almost everything, and that's not entirely the case anymore.
Well, the upside to that is that we are in mono black, so a lot of the mono black stuff should be a little bit cheaper.
Yep. So Taborax, for those that don't remember, Taborax Hope's Demise is a legendary creature, Demon Cleric with flying. It's a 2/2 by default. Taborax Hope's Demise has a lifelink as long as it has 5 or more counters on it. And whenever another non-token creature you control dies, put a +1 counter on Taborax. If that creature was a cleric, you may draw a card and lose a life. So whenever one of the apostles gets sacrificed, Taborax gets a counter, you draw a card. If you're sacrificing 5 of them to do the thing, then it's going to get 5 counters and you're going to draw 5 cards. So that's a really nice bit of synergy there. If you can manage to do the Shadowborn Apostles thing and have your commander out, really good value and a really nice buff.
Agreed.
First of all, we will might as well mention this. We did a show, I think it was 2 weeks back now, where we talked about having too many moving pieces in your deck.
Yep.
And this was exactly the kind of thing we talked about. And Steve kind of mentions it as well. It's really tricky to find that balance between how many Shadowborn Apostles do you want to run to most easily hit the threshold that you want to sacrifice them, as well as have an amount of demons that you can go get with them. Because you don't want to be going to get like a 4-drop demon. You ideally want to go get some giant, huge beater for free that would otherwise cost you 8 mana, because that's just, the best value you can get when you sacrifice those Apostles.
Agreed.
But if you don't have Apostles out, then you have just a bunch of, then you have a handful of 9-drop demons that you can't cast. It's a very tricky balance.
It looks, honestly, from the deck list that I looked at, it looks pretty good for the balance. I mean,
yeah.
Overall, everything looks good. I've never actually played a Shadowborn Apostle deck, so I'm not sure what the right number is for it, but 25 seems right about the right point.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. because you need to have 6 out to have it do the thing. So you need definitely, I would say, over 20, and I think 25 is probably where I would start just for testing purposes. So yeah, that makes sense. We will look at the land base first here. There's 33 true lands in the deck, and there's another 3 flip lands, so say 36.
Yep.
There's an Ancient Tomb, a Bajuka Bog, a Cabal Coffers, great in mono black, a Leech-Ridden Swamp, which is a land swamp that ETB's tapped, and you can spend a black and tap it, and each opponent loses a life, and you can use this only if you control 2 or more black permanents. So that's one that you don't see too often.
Yep.
Mortuary Meyer from the second Zendikar set, ETB's tap, but when it does, you can put a target creature from your graveyard on top of your library. Taps for black. Myriad Landscape for ramp. Nick those to take advantage of all those black mana pips. Phyrexian Tower as a sack outlet on a land. Prismatic Vista, just to go get you a land. A Strip Mine to deal with problem lands. There's 18 swamps. Temple of the False God. Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth to make the non-swamps into swamps. A Volrath Stronghold for some nice recursion, a War Room for some draw, and a Wasteland, once again, to deal with other people's Cabal Coffers.
Yes, indeed.
And there's 3 flip lands that have an option to come into play tapped as lands, or we have a Hagra Mauling on one side of one of the lands, so the spell costs 1 less to cast if an opponent controls no basics, and you can destroy target creature with it. There's a Malakir Rebirth, which is one of the flip lands also, that gives you an option to choose a creature, lose 2 life until the end of turn. That creature gains, when it dies, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. So if you don't need the land, you can use it to save one of your creatures. Last is Agadeem's Awakening. X black, and return from your graveyard to the battlefield any number of target creature cards that each have a different converted mana cost, X or less. So those are 3 things that are lands that are also spells, and maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. I'm going to throw this one note out here about flip lands. When they first came out, I think the comment I made was, in Commander, you should be really cautious about putting them into spell slots.
Yep.
And in the land slots, if you're going to use them as spells. Because in this case, they are kind of in land slots. There's 33 lands here, and this isn't that fast of a deck that's running CEDH kind of mana rocks. So there are lands. I've kind of changed my mind on that a little bit. I do think you probably do want to put them in land slots. I think the thing is, you have to be disciplined as a player. You can't get greedy and be like, oh, I'm going to miss a land drop in the hopes I can use this next spell. You have to just tell yourself, if this is in hand, I'm going to play it as a land and not miss my land drop. You have to just discipline yourself and say that you're going to do that and follow through.
Yep, I've had to do that a few times. I run Balaged Recovery in my Angels deck. Just for the simple fact, sometimes, I want to recur stuff as well. But there have been numerous times where I've had to put it down as the green source of land because I'm like, we're running low on lands. We need this now. Exactly.
Because the problem is if you're running it as a spell and you have, say, 36 lands in here and you have these 3, then the odds are much lower you're going to need them as a land, because your lands you just have more lands, so you're going to hit your drops more frequently. So you're probably not going to need the land side, and then you're stuck with a spell that isn't as good as some other version of it, because these are all kind of a weaker version of a spell. So that isn't good either. And then you're like, well, at that point, if you're running 36 lands, you might as well just run good spells. So I have changed my mind a little bit. I do think that running them in land slots makes sense. You just have to not let yourself get greedy with them, basically.
Exactly.
Any land stuff you would change here, Chris, that jumps out at you?
So the big one that originally jumped out at me, and I understand why it's in here, the Prismatic Vista.
Yeah.
Now, it searches a basic land card, and I understand because you can search up Leech-Ridden Swamp because it is considered a swamp, basic land type. That would be probably the first one that I would cut out of anything, or Myriad Landscape per se, because actually I pulled away from Myriad Landscape in a lot of decks due to the simple fact it comes into play tapped.
Yeah.
And unless it's within the first 3 turns, it's not that great of a card in my opinion. So a couple of suggestions I had for this was Witch's Cottage, which is from Throne of Eldraine. It is also a swamp. Comes into play, you can add black. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 3 or more other swamps. You're running a monocolored deck, so the chances of not having that's pretty slim. Plus you have Urborg, which turns your other stuff into swamps. It also reads, when it enters the battlefield untapped, you may put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. So it's going to follow similar to the other land that you have that does that, which is Mortuary Meyer, I do believe. Yep.
Yeah.
Mortuary Meyer. But you have the option of having it come into play untapped. So you could actually cut maybe Mortuary Meyer at the same, accord with that.
And it still counts as a swamp for Cabal Coffers.
Yes. So you're not working on the Urborg type of deal. You have the option of it coming into play untapped. It is fetchable if you wanted to put in, leave Prismatic Vista in type of deal. So, I mean, just an overall, better card for what you already have in there.
Sure.
Another one that I saw pop out at me that I was very surprised was not in this deck, due to the simple fact you're looking for like sack outfits and stuff, is Westvale Abbey. I mean, a land that creates colorless. For 5 mana, tap it, you pay 1 life, you can put in a 1/1 black human cleric creature token onto the battlefield. So you could sack that, token, do other shenanigans with the other stuff as well. But the big kicker is for 5 and tap, sacrifice 5 creatures, transform Westvale Abbey, and then untap it. And it transforms into, I do believe it's Ormondal, something like that. 9/7, flying, lifelink, indestructible, something or not. It's got so many keywords on it. I know it's just, it's an awesome card. So I was very surprised not to see that one per se in here. Now, a cut for that one, I don't know. That one was hard to figure out a cut for, because then you're kind of pulling away from other stuff, and maybe you could maybe cut one of the flipping lands if they're not doing enough for you.
Or Temple of the False God can burn you pretty frequently too. I'd be tempted to put it there. I agree, Westvale Abbey is a great pick, especially because it does make clerics, and those, when they're sacrificed to Taborax, draw you a card as well, and put a counter on them. So even more value there.
Sometimes just something, because this deck could flounder. I can see it floundering, like we were talking about, you might have high costing cards in your hand, or someone board wipes you repeatedly, and it's like, well, I got this land, I'll just start pitching all this stuff out here. Something to sink your mana into.
Well, and there's a lot of times too, if you have 6 Shadowborn Apostles out, I would still perhaps rather sacrifice the Westvale Abbey to go to make the Ormondal than I would go get in these demons. That's how good Ormondal is.
Yeah, and if you have Taborax out, and you sack them all, how many triggers you get off of Taborax.
Exactly.
I mean, that's pretty dumb right there, too.
Yeah, you still get your big triggers, and you get the giant Ormondal then on top of it.
Yeah, and the lifelink,
that was really good.
I can foresee the lifelink being, nice in this, because you're losing life to draw cards, in black. That's just how black draws cards. So that extra 9 life off of a swing from Ormondal would be huge.
Yep. So the suggestion I had, other than I had Westvale Abbey down as well, because that's a really good pick, is kind of an overall change to the deck, because one of the points he made was, if Taborax dies a couple times, it's tough to get him back out.
Yep.
We talked about how some of the demons tend to be kind of expensive. There's, more than a few 7 or 8 drops in here. One thing I like a lot in monocolor decks is a mana doubler package. You already have a Cabal Coffers, but like this deck could very easily support Cabal Stronghold if you just dropped 1 or 2 utility lands like the Leech-Ridden Swamp, that isn't that great, or Temple of the False God. There's just room to pull a few of those out, and you would very easily hit a threshold where pretty easily Cabal Stronghold is pretty good.
Yes.
There's things like Deserted Temple that you can run to untap your Cabal Coffers, or Petrified Field to get them back from your graveyard if someone blows them up. There's Thespian Stage to copy them. So there's a couple things in the lands you could do if you wanted to go that route. And for artifacts, Cage Sun, Gauntlet of Power, Extraplanar Lens. There's already a Crypt Ghast in here under creatures. So like Norcana Revenant maybe would be something you could add, or Bubbling Muck as a sorcery that lets you double the amount of mana you make. I feel it'll be a big change, because we're talking about adding like 6 or 7 cards to this deck, and finding room for them would be super tricky. But if you even had just one of those mana doublers out, it will be so much easier to just start hard casting giant demons.
Yep.
And still have mana left to do other stuff. Whereas right now, I think that's probably a tricky balance to hit. I just think this would be a deck that would really benefit from doing that. I'm just not sure how you would find room for all of those cards. So I wanted to throw it there as an option. But
if I were to do something like that, Dana, in my personal opinion, if I were going to jam in all the mana doublers, I'd probably cut out a little bit of the more like the Grave Pact package,
Probably,
like
yeah. Agreed.
The Bastion of Remembrance, that kind of stuff, cut out that package, which is doing a different game plan, whereas you'd rather be jamming big demons in.
Yeah, I kind of agree as well, because you're splitting your focus a little bit. I'm not sure necessarily that's the best way to go either.
No.
I'm just suggesting it. I just think it's something to consider. It might wind up helping, and maybe it wouldn't. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, even if you just put in one of the artifacts or something like that, if you have another option with it, that wouldn't be a bad idea. Like, Extraplanar Lens. I know I actually looked that up, and it's actually a really expensive card right now.
Yeah, so it is.
But I mean, at 3 mana, it might be worth it. At that point, though, you kind of got to change your swamps into snow covered, so you kind of dodge everyone else.
A little bit, yeah.
But I mean, that's not a big change because most people have all the snow covereds now. Because
these days they're much cheaper than they were not many years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, they're just out in the wild much more,
All right, Chris, what are the artifacts he has in the deck?
So we got 7 artifacts in the deck. We have Arcane Signet, Ashnod's Altar, Expedition Map, Phyrexian Altar, Soul Ring, Bolsa Citadel, which is a cheater face card, and Thrumming Stone, which is even more of a cheater face card.
Oh, Thrumming Stone's so good in this kind of deck.
Oh, yeah, I know. I got to pick one up for my Dragon's Approach deck, and I've been looking at the price and crying right now.
Oh, yeah. Which is true of so many cards right now.
I know.
Extra Planar Lens we just mentioned is the same way. Yeah, for sure. So this is a tricky spot here because, mono black, you probably are going to be doing your ramp through artifacts for the most part. But you just don't have, there's not enough slots in this kind of deck to do all the things you want to do. And ramp a little bit is one of the things that suffers because it's really only Soul Ring and Arcane Signet in here that are kind of true ramp cards.
Yes.
Among your artifacts. And I guess if you have to pick 2, those are probably the 2 to pick.
I would agree too. I mean, unless you can afford, the really expensive, nice ones,
right.
Which I don't tell people to go towards because I don't think that their overall value, what their price tag is compared to what the card does is really worth it. Unless you want to push your deck into that next tier level.
Exactly. Expedition Map, always a good card here, this kind of thing, because it can just go grab, your Cabal Coffers if you need to. It can go grab that Nykthos. I would imagine whatever it goes and grabs is almost always going to just generate a ton of value. So that's always a good card to see.
I would troll someone and grab Prismatic Vista and be like, what's up?
Yeah, just to confuse them, yeah. I mean, Bull Citadel, you said a treaty face card. It is. I mean, you just draw so much with it. It's so good.
Yep. I think the big reason for this is it is a card draw outlet as well as the sacrifice outlet, which is huge.
Does everything you want right there on one piece of cardboard.
Yep.
A couple sacrifice outlets here, also in Ashnod's Altar and Phyrexian Altar, both of which are super, super good.
Yes.
I didn't really have any suggestions here, in part because the easiest thing to kind of skip out on, I know ramp is important, but it's also not that exciting. Like putting mana rocks in your deck is never super fun. And if you have to skimp on something, particularly because your commander is kind of cheap and there's a bunch of cheap Shadowborn Apostles, maybe that's the best spot to skimp on stuff.
Yep. The only one that I had for a suggestion was Bantu's Monument. It's a 3-mana legendary artifact, and it reads, black creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So it's very similar to the medallion or something like that. But it's only creature spells. But it also reads, because as we were told, he was trying to go into that package of, drain and gain.
Yeah.
So it reads, whenever you cast a creature spell, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So you're getting the drain and gain, plus you're getting a reduced cost on your creatures. Which, granted, yes, it doesn't help the Shadowborn Apostles because there's only 1 black, but anything else would be cheaper overall.
Yeah, I think almost every other card in this deck at least has 1 colorless mana in the cost, including the commander.
Yes, that was because I found it weird that there wasn't the black medallion in here as well. But, I mean, that's also a freaking expensive card, too. I don't know what's going on with people. Come on now, stop buying all these cards.
Yeah, you're right. It is. It's no longer... I mean, not long ago, we were like, oh, you might as well put in a medallion. They're only like $4 or $5. That is not true anymore. Oh, it's crazy. All right, so let's go take a look at the enchantments here. We have Bastion of Remembrance, which is basically kind of an aristocrat's enchantment. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life.
Yep.
And when it enters the battlefield, you make a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. So that's something you can sacrifice and probably do pretty frequently in this deck, and it just gives you a hard-to-remove kind of Blood Artist effect.
Yes.
There's Grave Pact, which everyone knows, sacrifice a creature. When a creature you control dies, everyone else sacrifices a creature. Black Market, whenever a creature dies, put a charge counter on it, and at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, add a black for each counter on Black Market. Necropotence, just a Bolus, a Citadel-esque huge draw engine. Everyone knows Phyrexian Arena. We have Vampiric Rites, which is a sack outlet, 1 in a black, and you can sacrifice a creature and gain a life and draw a card. And the last, Wound Reflection. So it's basically a way to turn your damage into double damage. At the beginning of each end step, each opponent loses life equal to the life they lost this turn.
Yep, which is nice with the drain and gain aspect, because instead of just pinging for 1, it'll be 2 every turn or type of deal like that. So
yep. So the first one that jumped out at me, and this is me speaking from experience lately, I have not had really good luck with Black Market.
Yep, that's the first one that jumped out at me too.
And there's definitely those games I've seen before where I've played it and the next turn someone's like, oh, I can't believe you played the black market because I have to board wipe right now. I'm so far behind, and they have to cast a Wrath of God because they have no choice, and it puts like 8 counters on it or something. And then I'm on cruise control then.
Yep.
Like that kind of thing happens. But there's been a ton of times when I draw it on like turn 6. I'm like, well, I could cast this now and then just end my turn because it takes up all of my mana almost. Or I can do this one thing I can play this one mana rock, and then I can also play this one blocker that I'm going to need to save myself. And then I can draw 2 cards of Sign in Blood. Like the amount of mana it costs to not do anything until maybe not even next turn. It's not even like you have to wait a full turn. You have to wait until someone has creatures die and then wait till your full turn.
Yep.
It's just there's been enough times it hasn't got the job done, and I feel like that offsets the amount of time when the perfect thing happened.
Agreed. I mean, it sets up too much of a where if you play it, you need one of your, like your Phyrexian Altar, your Ashnod's Altar, so you can sack for free some of your creatures to put mana on there, but you're still not gaining anything per se overall in the grand aspect of it.
Yeah, and if you wanted that effect, I would probably just run Revel and Riches. I mean, yes, Revel doesn't generate you mana every turn to the same amount Black Market does, but it gets you something. Like the problem with Black Market is even if somebody board wipes next turn and you put 12 counters on it, if someone then removes it on their following turn, well, you get nothing.
Yep.
Revel and Riches always gives you treasure tokens. So when something dies, you're just going to get stuff as long as it's in play. You don't have to use it during your main phase. You can use it whenever. And there's just going to be some situations where you're going to play it and pass a turn, and it's going to come back to you, and you're going to cast a board wipe that no one can respond to, and kill 14 creatures and make 14 treasure, and then no one has a way to kill you because you just board wiped. And it goes all the way back around, and no one has a removal spell, and no one has a creature, and you kill them. You win the game, basically.
Yep. Yeah, I'm surprised I haven't seen Revel and Riches in quite a few more decks lately.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily know if it's like the best card in the deck, but I think if you want the Black Market effect, I think it's going to more consistently do the same thing, or close enough to it, and be more consistent and more productive more often.
Yep. I actually had a different suggestion for replacing that, because like I said, Black Market popped out at me as well. Sure. The one that I looked at was Attrition. Now, this came out of, I do believe this is the original Commander sets. I could be wrong with that. I know it was a long time ago.
I think it was an Urza's card originally, but it was reprinted in the very first Commander set.
Okay. So for everyone who doesn't know, Attrition is a 3-mana enchantment, 1 colorless pip with 2 black pips, and it reads, for 1 black, sacrifice a creature, destroy target non-black creature. Well, you're looking for sack outlets, and the thing that I saw really missing in this deck overall is removal. And that ability to sack plus put a counter on Taborax, draw a card, or whatever else you need to do with that, and destroy something is huge. I mean, just destroy. But then again, you're going to run into that one person who's playing black too, and you're like, oh no, what do I do here?
Right.
But I mean, it is a good sack outlet, and it's cheap costing. I mean, 3 mana to cast, 1 mana to activate. Totally worth it in the overall scheme.
Yep, I tend to agree. It's a really good card, particularly with this many expendable creatures in it, for sure. Yeah, and I don't know what I would pull out for it necessarily either. Maybe Vampiric Rites, but I think that's a really solid card too. I just don't know where I would put it.
Vampiric Rites is so good. I don't think I could do that neither. I mean, I always keep coming back to the Grave Pact. Yes, Grave Pact is super powerful. It's really nice. It gives you the 3 pips for your Nykthos and all that. Yep. But every time I've seen a Grave Pact come out, you immediately become the target. And this deck seems like it doesn't fare well when you have 3 other people targeting you out.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it's one of those things, too. I feel like if you're going to run Grave Pact stuff, you probably should run more than just Grave Pact. You should probably have Dictate of Erebos and like multiple things that kind of can repeat the same effect. And this deck really only has Grave Pact. So I feel like, I tend to agree. If I was going to, that wouldn't be one I would regret pulling just for that reason, that it's just one more direction the deck is going in and it doesn't need to go even more directions.
Agreed.
All right, Chris, what do we have for Planeswalkers here?
We have 1 Planeswalker in Liliana Dreadhorde General. Liliana is a 6-mana Planeswalker, 4 and double black, with 6 loyalty when she comes into play. Has a static ability that reads, whenever a creature you control dies, draw a card. So this goes into the sack outlet effect. The +1 reads, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. -4. Each player sacrifices 2 creatures. And -9, each opponent chooses a permanent they control of each permanent type and sacrifices the rest. So that's just black doing red things. That's not what's supposed to be happening here. So, in my opinion, Liliana is extremely powerful, and I'm assuming that she is in here for the simple fact of, let's just draw a card off the static ability when I sack something. I'm assuming that's what it is. Maybe spit out a 2/2, maybe sacrifice. I'm sure the ult never comes up.
When War of the Spark came out a few years back, this was like a $30 card at pre-release, and it's still a $30 card. So that should tell you how good it is. It just hasn't budged in years from being $30.
So you want to hear something funny about this card? Our store owner, she collects Liliana cards, and she has pretty much every Liliana that's ever been printed. And she's missing one, and that is the pre-release version of the Japanese altar art. She has the original Japanese altar art in foil, and those cards are pushing $6,000 a piece. I mean, they're dumb expensive.
Wow. That's rough. She's like, ooh, that's a tough purchase to justify, even if it's the last one you're missing.
So, I mean, that's how good this card is. I mean,
yeah.
I think if you're playing black, this card should be in there. Just drawing cards and spitting out zombies. I mean, that's chump blockers. People ain't going to want to attack you. You're just like, block, draw a card. What's up? I mean.
Yeah, I think the last time I saw this, I think was in Max's Ragnar Krav deck, where it's just like he's already drawing cards and sacrificing creatures anyway, and it just draws him twice as many cards. It was just disgusting.
Yeah, I think this Planeswalker is extremely powerful. 6 CMC for 6 loyalty. I mean, that's perfectly on par, equal. I mean, I love this card.
So why don't we quick go over the sorceries too, because there's only 6 of them, or only 4 of them here, excuse me.
Sure. We have Agadeem's Awakening, which Dana mentioned earlier. It's the flip land, or the MDFC card. We'll just call it that.
There we go.
Then we have Living Death, Reanimate, and Toxic Deluge. Good package. Toxic Deluge, phenomenal card. I actually haven't seen a whole lot of people playing this card lately, which is kind of weird, but it is what it is. Living Death. Now, Living Death is probably my favorite card out of all the sorceries, just due to the simple fact that you want to sacrifice all this stuff. So why don't we sack all these Shadowborns, get a demon out, whatever. We'll just sack the demon or whatever, because I already have like 30 Shadowborns in my graveyard, and we'll just bring them all back and do other stupid stuff. I mean, I think it fits this deck perfect due to the simple fact that you're already sacking stuff, so why not do it this way?
Yeah, I tend to agree. Living Death is when you are ready for it and no one else is, almost always is heinously one-sided too.
Most of the time, I'm always ready for it. There have been a lot of times, though, I've cast it as a board wipe. Just because I look at everyone's graveyards, even if I have nothing in my graveyard, I'm just like, guess what? We're wiping the board.
One suggestion I had here, you mentioned Toxic Deluge. Deluge is a really, really great card. However, you do have to pay life for it.
Yep.
And the one I was going to maybe suggest that also requires a move to snow-covered lands, which Chris had mentioned for extra lands, is swapping out Toxic Deluge for Dead of Winter.
Ooh, yep.
That was a 3-mana sorcery, so it costs exactly the same, 2 and a black, from Modern Horizons. The first Modern Horizons set, I believe. And it just gives creatures -1/-1 to end a turn for each snow permanent you control. So there's going to be occasions for sure where you're like, someone has a 14/14 Galta in play or something, and I need to kill it, so I'm going to pay 14 life and wipe the board. That doesn't happen very often. Like 95% of the time I've ever cast a Deluge has been for 5 or less. And in this deck with snow basics, pretty often Dead of Winter is going to do the same thing without forcing you to pay a chunk of life.
Yes.
I don't necessarily know if I would swap out Deluge and make that change just for it, but if I wanted another board wipe at the very least, I would that would be the next one I went with.
Yep. And the reason that I pulled away from Deluge, especially, like in my mindset for a mono black deck, is the only way to draw cards usually in black is to lose life already. So if you're adding Deluge on where you have to pay, 10 life to wipe the board out, that's a hefty toll. Plus you've already taken all the life loss from the other stuff. I mean, if you don't have a lifelink package built in, it's actually harming you more than helping you. Yeah,
for sure it can. I've definitely I need to top deck a board wipe right now and top deck Toxic Deluge. I'm like, I can't cast it to do what I need to do. A Damnation would have worked, but this isn't going to work because I just can't afford to put 9 life into a deal with that 9/9.
Yes, I agree. There was a few of them that I looked at that I would probably, put in my mind to maybe put in. Okay. And one of them I know Dana hates with a passion, and that's Torment of Hailfire. So if we're going into a big mana package,
sure, yeah.
Torment does do, it's a drain and gain type of thing. It, forces sacrifices and discards. So, I mean, it's something to pump that mana into if you're sitting on a bunch of mana. Now, it's not something I usually suggest to people to use, but this seems like, mono black needs as much help sometimes as they can get, and this is a really good card to do it.
It definitely is. One kind of pricey one I will suggest, because it's like $40 now, is Patriarch's Bidding. It's a sorcery for 3 black.
I forgot about
each
that
player
one.
chooses a creature type, and each player returns all creature cards of the type chosen this way from his or her graveyard. Picking demons or even Shadowborn Apostles in this deck probably is pretty good value. I don't know what you would cut for it, but I think it will be a really good card here if you happen to have one or have the means to pick one up. I think it will do a lot of really solid work here in this deck.
Yep. Another one that it's actually a new card. I'm not sure if this is really a good card. I saw it and I threw it on my list. And it fits into similar to the Living Death Toll, but it's not really sacrificing everyone else's creatures, is Haunting Voyage. Now, this card is high CMC, 4 and double black for it. It says choose a creature type, return up to 2 creature cards of that type from your graveyard to the battlefield. But then it also reads, if the spell was foretold, return all creature cards of that type from your graveyard to the battlefield instead. Now, foretold is 7 mana. So, I mean, that's hard on that too, but, if you have 15 Shadowborn Apostles in there, you just return them all, and you're not actually helping out anyone else on the field. It's just helping you in the game plan.
And you can being able to split the cost by foretelling it is really, really good too.
Yep, yeah, you could foretell it early in the game and just sits there, and then towards the end of the game, it's like, well, I have all this mana, I have all this. Oh, cool, let's just jam this out.
Exactly. The last one I might suggest, Reanimate's a great card. Put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, and you lose life equal to its converted mana cost.
Yep.
1 black mana to do that, and it's any graveyard, so you can take the best thing in someone else's graveyard. So it's fantastic. However, I was wondering in this deck if Victimize wouldn't do the same thing better. Victimize is 2 and a black, so it's 2 more to cast. Choose target creature card in your graveyard, and again, you're limited to yours. Sacrifice a creature, and if you do, return the chosen cards to the battlefield tapped. So instead of just bringing a thing back, you have to sacrifice one thing, which is probably going to be a Shadowborn Apostle, and then you bring 2 things back. And given how big some of the beater demons are here, or even maybe it's just another Apostle already in your graveyard, or maybe you just need 2 more Apostles. Like maybe you just need to get up ahead of Shadowborn Apostles to be able to use them, and this lets you sacrifice something and bring 2 of them back into play if they're already in your graveyard.
Yeah, I like that one a lot too. I had a very similar, not similar to like Reanimate effect, but a sacrifice effect to do something different, and that's Diabolic Intent, because I see there's no tutors in this deck whatsoever, which is fine. I don't like suggesting tutors, but it is a sacrifice tutor, so you have to sacrifice something which still plays into your game plan, and maybe you need to go for your a land or something, or an enchantment or something, to get the game rolling in your favor. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to have something like that in there.
Yeah, tend to agree with that. Okay, should we jump over to the instance here quick?
Sure, let's do it, because there's a whole bunch of them. 3
instant spells. You have Deadly Relic, which was the free spell. If you control a commander, you may cast this spell without paying its mana cost, and you can exile a creature for 4 mana, or for none if you control your commander. So that's just a great spell. And we mentioned the other 2 were both flip MDFC cards. We have Hagar Mauling and Malkir Rebirth. I mean, this deck is just struggling for slots, basically, and that's part of the reason there's a removal spell on what's in a land slot here.
Yep. Yeah, it's the way that this deck is built, I noticed, like, because when I'm doing my Dragon's Approach deck, is you have to figure out something that you just need to lack on, and it seems like the instant slot and the sorcery slots where you lack on, you need more permanence in this type of deck.
Yeah, it's a little bit like I talked about in our Too Many Moving Parts. Sometimes you just need to be like, I gotta let something go. I can't do all the things. So maybe you're just gonna be running with a kind of a lean removal package and just have to be like, well, I only have a couple options, and then after that I'm gonna lose. But I mean, that's just how it works sometimes.
Yeah, maybe you can just keep up because you have such a hefty creature package. I mean, maybe that's just what it is.
Did you have anything else for instance you wanted to mention here, Chris?
Not really. Instance was a hard one for me because I kind of looked at it and I'm like, okay, in order to keep the package the same, we kind of just got to dodge one of these. So
All right, why don't we go over the creatures? There's 25 Shadowborn Apostles, but there's more than that because there's 44 total.
There are 44 creatures. So we'll go right down the list. I'm going to read them quick for everybody. So we have Archfiend of Despair, Blood Artist, Cryptghast, Demon's Disciple, Grey Merchant, Grim Haruspex, Massacre Worm, Pestilence Demon, Priest of Forgotten Gods, Reaper from the Abyss, Reaver Demon, Runescar Demon, Shadowborn Demon, Species Specialist, Twilight Prophet, Zulaport Cutthroat, Kokusho the Evening Star, Sir Conrad the Grim, and Vilis Broker of Blood.
Oof. A lot of big beater demons and things that drain, which we kind of knew here.
Monstrous monstrosities.
The first one that I will throw out there that I don't necessarily like very much is Pestilence Demon. And I say this as someone with a Pestilence deck built around using Pestilence. But man, 8 mana for that effect is a gazillion. And pretty often when you cast it, you don't have mana left to even use the Pestilence effect.
Yep, unless you're cheating it out with Shadowborn Apostle, which I can think of a couple other demons I'd rather have out over that one.
Sure.
Now the damage to everybody is nice, but like I've said, I think this will be the third time I said this now too. With black, you're spending so much life to draw cards, so that damage is actually hurting you just as much as it hurts your opponents.
Yeah, definitely can, for sure. Because I talked about my Pestilence deck. That deck has ways to defray the damage even if I get it out. This one doesn't. So this I don't love that one here. The one demon I wrote down I would probably swap into that spot is Harvester of Souls.
Yes.
4 black, death touch, 5/5, but whenever another non-token creature dies, you may draw a card. So it's just one more way to draw when those Shadowborn Apostles are being sacrificed.
Agreed. One that I was considering for this, and this is a demon, and it's only 4 mana, so it is one that you could cast as well that could fit your theme, and that's Nightmare Shepard. This came out of Theros, the new Theros set. I don't even remember what the name of it is.
Theros Beyond Death.
Yeah, so Theros and Ikoria are kind of a blur to me, because that's when, the world decided to just hate us, so...
Exactly.
So for 4 mana, you get a 4/4 flyer that reads, whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may exile it. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except for it's a 1/1 and it's a nightmare in addition to its other types. So I see this as a way to kind of cheat with the Shadowborns a little bit. Granted, you don't get to reanimate them per se out of your graveyard, but you can sacrifice them throughout the early game if he's out there, and get another one right away. So you don't even have to recast it because it's still Shadowborn. It's an exact copy of it, so it should still have the ability. And then you can sack it later to the ability to get out a big beater demon.
Yeah, that's a really good pick. That card was absolutely a beating in Standard. I remember hearing people constantly be like, I didn't realize how good Nightmare Shepard was until I had it in play or played against it.
Yeah, it's especially when we're playing a 100-card format. The ability to copy stuff, even if one of your great big beater demons dies or whatever, it's a 1/1 off that ability, but you get to keep all the ability that's stapled to it. So like Harvester for Souls, for instance, now you have a 1/1 with Death Touch that, whenever another creature dies, you get to draw a card and you get to copy it because you have Nightmare Shepard out. So it seems like a really good card.
Yeah, definitely kind of a never-ending value train there if you can get the whole thing going. Any more suggestions you had here for creatures, Chris?
I do, because I am not a fan of Kokusho at all.
Okay.
I never have been. This deck, the way I look at it, so Kokusho is a Dragon Spirit for 6 mana, so you can't cheat it out with Shadowborn Apostle, so this is something you have to actually cast. So I would try to dodge that, and one that really popped into my head, and I really liked because it fits the theme of sacrifice along with Drain and Gain, and that's Bantu the Glorified.
Oh, sure.
Bantu is a 4/6 that costs 3 mana, 2 colorless and a black. It has Menace and Indestructible, and it reads that Bantu can't attack or block unless a creature died under your control this turn. Okay, that's kind of hard sometimes, but we're playing a sacrifice deck, so why not, try it. So for 1 colorless and a black, the activated ability reads, sacrifice another creature, scry 1. Each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. So, you get a scry, you get a gain. If you have out Taborax, you get to kind of do this nice little cheat thing where you're like, scry, oh, I don't like that card, now I'll draw this next card. That kind of fun stuff with it. So, overall, I think this is a really good inclusion. Plus, you get a 4/6 that's indestructible with Menace, so you can start beating face with it as well.
That seems really, really solid, and it's gonna like solve a few of the problems that he talked about the deck has too, which is what we're looking to do here.
Yes.
Yeah. After that, though, he mentioned the deck is pretty tight, and it is. Like, there's just not a lot of room, and even some of the suggestions we had, we were struggling to find what cards to cut for them.
Yeah, I have quite a few suggestions per se. It was just hard trying to find the cuts.
Yeah, right.
Because
what other ones did you have for ideas just for future use? If there's some demon that isn't performing and he does want to yank it for something else, what did you have for ideas there?
So to stick with the Drain and Gain theme, I was thinking of Ayara. I think that's how you pronounce her name. Mm-hmm. First of Lochthwain. And Ayara is just triple black for a 2/3. So this is going to help out your Nykthos overall too. So for your extra mana if you ever need it. But it reads, whenever Ayara or another black creature enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. That fits the drain and gain theme.
Yep.
Plus, you can tap to sacrifice another black creature to draw a card. So that fits the sacrifice theme, where then you can start putting counters on Taborax as well and drawing cards. So you get to draw 2 cards if you're sacrificing a cleric. So, I mean, that's just a powerful engine right there if you can get that going. Now, what to cut with it? We're at the point now, it's like, I have no clue.
Yep, that's where it gets tricky. And it's already pretty lean for the most part.
Yep. And the final one I had for creature base to, suggestion would be Veto, Thorn of the Dusk Rose.
Oh, so good.
Yep, a 1/3 for 3 mana. And the reason that I really like this one is because Veto is a cleric as well. So, I mean, it could fit, if you ever have to sack him or anything else like that. And Veto reads, whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. So, yes, you're kind of missing out on the aspect of hitting everybody with that, but you get to target one person. Or for 5 mana, you can just give all your creatures lifelink, which is what I think this deck kind of needs, Give a little bit of lifelink, start smacking in, and get that life back, and then you can do even more wacky shenanigans in black.
Yeah, once you start, once you're in black and you start paying life for things, which just has plenty of things to do that, having ways to gain that life back to get you kind of back to revenue neutral is pretty valuable sometimes.
Yeah, and I would love to see someone just, pay 5 mana and attack with like 20 Shadowborn Apostles and be like, what's up? They all have lifelink.
Figure it out. All right, I think that's all I have, unless you have any closing comments here, Chris.
Closing comments, not really too much per se, aside from I understand the pain of this deck. Trust me.
For sure.
Having the option of playing multiple of one card is really hard because it pulls away from so much of the other, aspects of the deck. And what I'm going through right now with my dragon deck is I might just cut it down to running only like 4 dragons in the deck, and then running all aspects around that. So that might be something. Maybe we cut down more demons in the deck so you can have more of a tuned, theme to it, whereas like the drain and gain with sacrifice, and then the dragons are just a oops it happened type of deal.
Right. Yeah, I think, and since beating face with the demons here isn't his number one plan, although it is a plan.
Yes.
I would say there's a little room there as well, for sure. All right, well, Steve, thank you very much for sharing this deck with us. I've seen a couple of different Shadowborn Apostles lists. I think we did an Athreos one once and something else, but I've never seen Mono Black Taborax. That's a cool pick, and that was a very neat deck, even if we struggled to find room for anything because we're losing a quarter of the deck just to Shadowborn Apostles.
Exactly.
All right, so we'll be back on Monday with a new show, and I think we're going to crank out 3 deck techs in a row here as well on Thursday's show. This is the first of those. So thank you for listening. Steve, thanks for supporting us on Patreon. We really appreciate it, and thanks to all of you for listening, giving us upvotes, going to the YouTube channel, whatever it is you do. That means a lot as well. I am Dana. You can find me on the Twitter birds at Dana Roach. You can find Chris at WiseSwishy1, and you can find Max at CMDR_Max. Our show is edited by Rafael Garcia. You can find him at Ursa Bearwalker. And our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. We'll be back on Monday with a new show. Until then, I'm Dana.
And I'm Chris.